Welcome to the Digital Global Media Forum 2020. Now, throughout this year, we've been discussing issues pertaining to pluralism, populism, and journalism. And our guest today is someone who has a lot to say about all of those subjects. Can Dündar is one of the most recognized journalists in Turkey. And for decades, he wrote columns, appeared on television news, and most recently, he worked as the editor-in-chief of the respected Cumhuriyet newspaper. But his life changed 5 years ago after he published a report saying that Turkey had secretly been sending weapons to Syria. We'll speak about that in a minute, but first of all, welcome to the Global Media Forum, Mr. Dündar.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the invitation.
Now, before we dive into your personal background, I'd like to ask you about your views on some of the latest developments in Turkey. There's a new law designed to limit hate speech online. Now, at face value, that sounds like something that could be quite sensible, but there has been sharp criticism from around the globe saying that this new law amounts to nothing but government control and censorship. Now, what are your thoughts on this law?
Unfortunately, it's nothing to do with hate speech. In fact, we are the targets. We have been the targets of hate speech by the Turkish government's troll army for years now. And unfortunately, it's nothing to do with hate speech, but it's something to do with censorship. So it's definitely a censorship preparation by the government to block the last avenue of free speech in Turkey, as the government already has control over the most of the Turkish newspapers and TV stations. Now they are trying to block the way to social media, and unfortunately, this is the last castle for journalists and for defenders of free speech in Turkey. And if we lose this last castle, there'll be, unfortunately, no free speech at all in Turkey anymore.
These changes that are being brought up in Turkey, they are happening under the leadership of Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan. And he has gained traction across the country. But there are other countries that have also similar populist leaders. Like in Brazil, we have Jair Bolsonaro. In the US, we're dealing with Donald Trump. In your own analysis, in your view, what do you believe do populist leaders do differently in the way that they use the media, perhaps abuse the media, often to their own advantage?
Erdogan managed to control the media moguls of main Turkish mainstream media organizations. First, he forced the media owners to pay a kind of tax punishments, and he punished them, and he forced them to leave the arena. Then he forced his businessmen to buy those media outlets. Then there'll be no need for censorship anymore, because they were censoring themselves. So for us, it was difficult to cope with your own boss. You can cope with the government censorship, but how can you fight against your boss? So most of them were fired, and unfortunately, those media organizations kind of conquered by the government. Then the rest of it, some critical media organizations put themselves under heavy pressure by the government, and many of the journalists were put in jail, or we spend most of our times in the courtrooms or in solitary confinement. There's a huge pressure over the media, and then unfortunately we have only social media left to express ourselves. And now they are trying to design this lost castle.
Now, you just highlighted a few aspects of your personal experience, and let's talk about that if we can. It's been a tumultuous 4 or 5 years for you now. You spent months in prison in Turkey, and you even survived assassination attempts since you published those original reports linking the Turkish intelligence services to weapons sales in Syria. But before then, you truly were one of the most recognized journalists in Turkey. How would you say has your reputation changed in the past few years, and above all, why?
Well, I'm not sure about my reputation, but the Turkey's and Erdogan's reputation has dramatically changed so far, as he's regarded as an autocrat now by the most of European circles. And in my case, of course, I have always had critical views about the government from the beginning, and they didn't like it. So for most of Erdogan supporters, most probably they regarded me as a traitor or a terrorist. But for the opponents of Turkey, I hope I am regarded as a defender of truth. So this polarization, unfortunately, in Turkey is valid for myself as well as any other subject. You are either a terrorist or a hero. I don't want to be either each of them. Of course, we are not heroes or we are not terrorists, but we are journalists. But if you are doing, if you are giving some material about Erdogan's corruption case, or as you mentioned, some secret operations of Turkish government, you may easily regard it as a terrorist.
Mm. And you've had to move away from Turkey. You live in exile in Germany, where there is a high Turkish-born population. Do you find that Erdogan's populist strategies, his messages, his rhetoric against you have cast a long shadow all the way to Germany, where many Turks actually do support the Turkish president?
Of course, I mean, this shadow is being following me, and Germany. I might say that I feel at home here with the threats and the critical points. But when you look deeper, you can see there's a problem with the integration policy of Germany. I feel that most of the people here don't feel like at home in their home country. It's more like an identity crisis. And Erdogan gave them an identity that German governments failed to give, I'm afraid. And that's why they've been watching Turkish TVs all day long, which gave them nothing but government propaganda. And I don't think that they know a lot about real Turkey. And when Erdogan challenges the rest of the world, especially the Christian world, and they feel like happy and proud. But bear in mind that they are not the only ones living in Germany, and there are quite a big population of opponents of Erdogan here in Germany. And for the last decades, many has been coming, uh, unfortunately, because of this brain drain. And many academics, politicians, journalists, and Germany has become a kind of new place for opponents of Erdogan. So this polarization was exported from Turkey to Germany.
You mentioned the identity crisis issue in Germany, but what about Turkey? I mean, Turkey is a very pluralistic society, actually. There's lots of different backgrounds, tribes, even religions and sects, and you name it. So, is there a single Turkish identity that Erdogan somehow manages to get people together under, or what is the strategy there that he's using to try to make it feel like there is one Turkish identity and you're either with him or you're against him?
Turkey has always been a secular country with a huge Muslim population. And secularism is something very important for Turkish case because it's almost impossible to imagine a Muslim populated country with a secular regime. And now Erdogan tried to replace this secular ideology with a religious one, with an Islamist ideology. And so far, he managed to get the backing of masses and mostly poor masses who believe in God, but at the same time trying to find an identity. And Erdogan, as I mentioned, managed to give them this identity. And but bear in mind that still at least half of the population are still supporting the secular, pluralist, democratic, free country. So it's a kind of tug of war between two forces. And I'm sure in the end, we will get our colorful country back from Erdogan.
So, what can we do? How can journalists help? And what can news organizations do to fight against strategies used by such populist leaders in defense of a free press?
first of all, I mean, giving the opportunity to the opponents, as you are doing now, is of course, big support for us. I mean, because as far as I understand, in Germany, people like to talk about Erdogan, but we should mention that Turkey is not equal to Erdogan, and there's another Turkey that's defending democracy and under very high risk. And at the same time, journalism under threat, but thanks to many journalists, associations, organizations, you name it, we have it, a lot of like Reporters Without Borders, like PEN, like Article 19. There are a lot of organizations trying to unite the journalists against those kind of aggressive governments. Those solidarity is so important for us. And lastly, I can say that we are here as an exile, but we found our German friends supporting us, and now we start working together about stories which was censored in Turkey, but now we have an international audience and international partners, and that gave us an opportunity to work together, to work a lot and deeper, and to overcome those censorship in our own country. So we try to use this crisis as an opportunity to turn this crisis as an opportunity. And so far, I feel really happy to work with my German colleagues here in Germany.
I'm really glad to hear that. And thank you very much, Mr. Dündar, for making time today to speak to us and to
Pleasure.
keep defending the freedom of the press, not just in your country, but around the world. We really look forward to welcoming you to the Global Media Forum 2021 next year. And until then, please stay healthy. Thank you so much.
Hopefully. Thank you very much. Thank you. It was a pleasure.